I wasn't supposed to hear it, but once you hear the truth, you can't unhear it. That's the line that keeps replaying in my mind over and over again, like a clock that refuses to stop ticking. I wish I could say it happened in some dramatic, movie-worthy moment, but no. It happened on an ordinary Thursday in my ordinary kitchen with a pot of chicken soup simmering on the stove and my granddaughter's tiny socks still warm from the dryer. Funny how life works like that. Big heartbreaks slip into your life through small cracks. That morning, I had been feeling peaceful, satisfied, like an older woman who'd earned her quiet. I had my slippers on. I had my tea steeping. The sun was pouring through the window in that soft, forgiving way it does when the seasons are starting to shift. And then my phone rang. It was my daughter-in-law, Mia. Her voice trembled, rushed, breathless, emotional, the way someone sounds when they're holding back tears. "Mom, can you please watch Lily today? Please, I really need you." She never called me Mom. Never. I should have known right then. But when someone you love calls you with that kind of desperation, you don't stop to protect yourself. You answer. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, adjusted the phone against my ear, and told her, "Of course, baby. Bring her over." She exhaled like she'd been underwater. "Thank you. You're a lifesaver." A lifesaver. That's what she called me. And maybe that was the very first lie of the day. But I didn't know that yet. Back then, at that moment, I felt needed, useful, welcomed. After my husband passed, and after my own son started drifting into his marriage like a man caught in a current, I learned to cherish any moment my family still reached for me. So I made that pot of soup. I warmed up the house. I even baked the little blueberry muffins my granddaughter likes to crumble all over my couch. I thought I was doing something good. I thought I was still a part of my son's life. I thought my daughter-in-law genuinely needed me. I didn't know what was waiting on the other side of that babysitting request. I didn't know that the truth was already on its way to hit me like a gust of cold air. But that's how betrayal enters. Quietly. Disguised as need. Normal life. Before everything broke. I haven't always been a lonely woman, waiting on the edges of her own family. There was a time my house felt full. Loud even, with my son's laughter bouncing between walls, with weekend barbecues and birthday candles melting on the kitchen table. My boy, Daniel, was the kind of child who could talk the ears off a statue. His smile, pure sunshine. His loyalty, unshakable. Even when he grew up and started building a life of his own, he'd still show up at my door with groceries and say, "Ma, I know you already have food, but I saw this and thought of you." He was always thinking of me. At least until Mia came into the picture. She wasn't a bad person, not on the surface. Pretty, polite, soft-spoken in front of others. But there was something about her that always felt careful, measured, like every smile had been checked in a mirror first. Still, I tried with her. I really did. Because a mother doesn't want to be the problem. A mother wants her son's home to feel steady, warm, supportive. Their daughter, my sweet Lily, brought joy back into the family. A warm little light, a giggle that could soften a stone. Whenever I visited, Lily's arms stretched toward me like she'd known my heart in a past life. But visits became less and less frequent. Requests for help? Fewer still. Not because I didn't offer. Oh, I did. Many times. "No, we're fine. No, we've got it. No, we're trying to figure things out as a couple." It was subtle at first. A shift. A distancing. Like someone slowly backing away so you don't notice how far they've moved. I told myself it was normal. Young couples want independence. New mothers want to prove themselves. But deep down, I felt something changing. Something small but sharp. The way Mia looked at me sometimes, like I was an obligation instead of family. The way Daniel's phone calls got shorter. The way decisions were made without including me, even when they involved traditions we'd held for years. So maybe that's why when she called that Thursday begging for help, I said yes without hesitation. I thought it meant things were warming up, that I was still part of their circle. But circles can break quietly. The day it all shifted. Mia arrived quicker than I expected. Hair half-combed, sunglasses still on, keys trembling in her hand. "Thank you again," she said, her voice thick with urgency. I can't take her with me today. I promise I'll explain later." She kissed Lily's cheek, hugged her tight, then rushed out so fast she forgot her purse on the entry table. I picked up little Lily, her soft curls brushing my chin, and carried her inside. We played. We laughed. She babbled stories only she understood. It felt like any other quiet, loving afternoon. But then, maybe 20 minutes later, I heard a vibration coming from the entryway. Her phone. Mia had left her purse, and her phone was ringing inside it. I didn't go looking for it. I wasn't snooping. I had no reason to. But the vibration kept going, and then it stopped. Only to start again seconds later. When I walked to the entry table, the purse was half open, the phone face down, screen lighting up with each call. I picked it up, only to flip it over, thinking maybe it was important. The call had already stopped. But as soon as my hand touched the screen, a voice message began playing automatically. A voice I recognized. Mia. I didn't press play. I swear on my late husband's grave, I didn't press play. But the message played loud enough for me to hear every word. And that was the moment everything inside me changed. Because the voice on that message, it wasn't trembling. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't grateful. It was cold, sharp, ugly. Yeah, she said yes. Of course she did. She's pathetic. She lives for this. I swear, if we don't start cutting her out soon, she's going to think she actually matters. I froze. Lily's tiny hand was still wrapped around my thumb. The soup was still simmering. The house was still warm. But I felt something inside me collapse. Slowly, quietly, like a shelf finally giving in under years of weight. And the message kept playing. No, Daniel won't say anything. He's scared of hurting her feelings. But once I get what I need, she won't be a problem. She won't be anything. My ears rang. The room swayed. And for the first time in my life, holding my granddaughter hurt. Not physically, emotionally. Because suddenly, I wasn't sure where I stood in my own family anymore. You know, growing up in my family felt like living under a ceiling that only I wasn't allowed to break. My brother, he was the golden child, the one they believed in without question. Every dream of his was a prophecy, and every dream of mine was a joke. I still remember the evenings after school when I'd come home holding my notebooks, full of ideas, full of the things I wanted to build one day. And my mother would look at me with that soft, dismissive smile. "Beta, don't stress too much. Your brother will take care of things." That line, it followed me everywhere like a shadow. A reminder that in their eyes, I was never meant to be anything more than a backup plan. But you know what's funny? sometimes the people closest to you don't see your fire because they never expected you to have any. And I did have fire. Quiet fire. The kind that grows slowly until one day it burns loud. I started working harder than anyone thought I could. Late nights, early mornings, studying while everyone slept. Practicing skills I knew nobody believed I could master. While they underestimated me, I was building myself, brick by brick. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. Some nights I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of every word that ever told me I wasn't enough. And trust me, the weight of disappointment from your own family, it hits different. It hits deep. One day, something changed, a moment I'll never forget. It was during a family gathering, everyone sitting together, laughing, talking about the future, well, his future, his plans, his projects, his ambitions. Like my dreams didn't even exist in the same room. Someone asked me casually, "So, what are you planning to do with your life?" Before I could answer, my aunt chuckled. "You know her. She's good, but not that good." She said it like a joke, a harmless comment. But jokes only hurt when there's truth behind them, truth they believe, not the truth you know. And for the first time, I spoke up. Not loudly, not aggressively, just firmly, clearly, with a voice I didn't even know I had. "I'm not who you think I am, and you have no idea what I'm capable of." The room went silent. Not because I was rude, but because I wasn't supposed to fight back. Not me. Not the quiet daughter. But that moment was the beginning. The beginning of me choosing myself. I started applying for opportunities secretly. Jobs, internships, training programs, anything that could help me build a future outside the limits they set for me. I knew they wouldn't support me. I knew they wouldn't understand. But sometimes moving silently is the only way to protect your dreams. And then the day came. The email. The acceptance letter. The one thing I had worked so hard for. The thing I cried for, prayed for, fought for. A full scholarship. A program so competitive, so prestigious, that even my golden brother had once been rejected from it. I remember staring at the screen, my hands shaking, my heart pounding like it wanted to run ahead of me. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I just held that moment close, like a small flame I didn't want the wind to touch. But the truth has a way of coming out. And when it did, my family wasn't proud. No, they were shocked, confused, almost annoyed that I had succeeded without their permission, without their guidance. My mother looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. My father stayed quiet. My brother said nothing at all. You would think their silence broke me, but it didn't. It strengthened me. Because in that silence, I realized something powerful. When people don't believe in you, their silence becomes fuel. Their doubt becomes direction. And their disbelief becomes the fire that pushes you forward. I left home a week later, suitcase in one hand, scholarship papers in the other, confidence growing in the space where their approval used to be. And the moment the bus pulled away from my street, I felt it. A freedom I had never tasted before. A freedom that whispered, "This is just the beginning. This was the start of my journey, the start of my rise, the start of the success they never saw coming because they never bothered to look. And trust me, destiny has a way of surprising those who underestimate you. Leaving home wasn't just a decision, it was a declaration, a quiet rebellion, a promise to myself that I would never again shrink just so someone else could feel tall. The city I moved to felt like another universe. No familiar voices telling me what I couldn't do, no footsteps judging mine, just noise, endless noise. But it was the kind of noise that made you feel alive. For the first time, every morning felt like a fresh page, and I was finally holding the pen. Those early months, they were brutal. New environment, new expectations, new responsibilities, and absolutely nobody to fall back on. But sometimes, being alone is exactly what you need to discover who you actually are. I remember my first week in the program. Everyone around me looked sharper, smarter, more prepared. At least that's how it felt. They came from families who supported them, who believed in them, who bragged about them. And then there was me, the girl who left home with a scholarship and silence. A silence that still echoed in my chest. A silence I wanted to break with success so loud that even miles away, my family would feel it. Every day I pushed myself harder. While others rested, I refined. While others studied enough, I studied more. While others celebrated small wins, I treated them like stepping stones to something greater. Not because I wanted to compete with them, but because I was competing with the version of myself they once dismissed. One night, while working late in the lab, I overheard a professor talking to another faculty member. "He's silent," he said, "but she's sharp. And she's focused. Give her time. She'll outgrow them all." He didn't know I was listening, but those words, those simple, unexpected words became the wind behind my wings. For the first time, someone who didn't know my story saw my potential. Not my brother, sister, not the underestimated daughter, just me. From that day on, everything changed. Not instantly, not magically, but gradually, like dawn replacing the night. Opportunities started opening. I got invited to projects, selected for teams, chosen to lead tasks others thought I wasn't ready for. And every small victory built a piece of the woman I was becoming. But success comes with its own shadows. And mine arrived in the form of homesickness. Not for the house, but for the version of myself that once believed family meant support. One evening, I received a call from my mother. Her voice was gentle, hesitant. She asked if I was eating well, sleeping well, the basic questions. But behind her words, I could feel something else, a quiet curiosity she didn't know how to express. Almost like she wanted to ask me, "How did you do it? How did you become this?" I answered politely, but I didn't let myself fall back into old patterns. I didn't seek validation. I didn't shrink. I didn't soften my achievements. When she hung up, I sat there, feeling a strange mix of sadness and strength. Because life has a way of teaching you that sometimes the people who never believed in you will one day watch you rise from far away. And the distance, it becomes necessary. Not to punish them, but to protect yourself. By the second year, I wasn't just surviving, I was excelling, winning competitions, leading projects, earning recognition that once felt impossible. People began calling me the quiet storm, The one who didn't talk much, but when she did, everyone listened. The girl who once blended into the background was now the one people sought out for advice, for leadership, for inspiration. But my biggest moment came during a national conference. I had been chosen, yes, me, to present our team's project on stage. My name on the banner, my words echoing through the hall, my ideas shaping the discussion. When I stepped onto that stage, with the lights warm on my face and hundreds of eyes watching me, I felt something shift inside me. Confidence didn't whisper anymore. It roared. I finished the presentation to the sound of applause. Loud, long, genuine. The kind of applause that fills the cracks in your heart left by years of being underestimated. Afterwards, a senior official approached me and said, "You're going very far. Very far. Don't stop." And I realized I had once begged for the approval of people who couldn't even see my worth, while strangers were seeing it clearly. That night, as I returned to my small apartment, I stood in front of the mirror, tired, proud, changed. I whispered to myself, "This is who you were always meant to be." Not the quiet daughter, not the overlooked child, not the shadow behind someone else's spotlight, but a woman rising in her own sky, brilliant, determined, unstoppable. And the best part, my journey wasn't done yet, not even close, because the real twist, the moment that would change everything, was still waiting ahead. Life has a funny way of circling back on you, right at the moment you think you're free. I was in my final year, juggling internships, final projects, and job applications, when everything took a turn I never saw coming. It started with a phone call from my son's wife, my daughter-in-law, Maya. Soft-spoken, always polite, always trying just a little too hard to impress me, as if motherhood had turned me into an authority figure instead of a woman simply trying to live her life. "Auntie," she said, voice trembling like she practiced the call 10 times. I really need help. Could you babysit this weekend? Just 2 days. Please?" Now, understand, I barely visited home during my studies. Not out of anger, but because distance had become my peace. Still, something in Maya's voice, the way she swallowed her plea, the strain beneath her words, made me pause. "Is everything all right?" I asked. "Oh, yes, she said too quickly. "Just work, just tired. You know how it is." I didn't believe her, but I also didn't push. I agreed to come home for the weekend. It wasn't a small thing. I rearranged my entire schedule, packed up my work, and traveled 3 hours after a full week of classes and labs. When I reached the house, the same house where I once felt invisible, I felt an ache expand in my chest. Memories don't knock. They just enter. Maya met me at the door, smiling like she was trying to hide a bruise in her heart. My grandson, sweet little Ashan, ran into my arms, his tiny fingers grabbing at my shoulder like he was my safe place. That boy had no idea how much strength he gave me in just that one hug. "Thank you so much for coming, Ma," she said. "We'll be back by Sunday night, I promise." "We?" I asked. She hesitated, just a flicker, and then said, "Me and your son, of course." But I'd been a mother too long not to hear the unspoken truth in her pause. My son wasn't home. He wasn't even in the picture. And I suspected she was covering for him. Still, I let it go. Because sometimes you have to let a story reveal itself in its own time. That night, after putting Ashan to sleep, I went downstairs to warm some milk. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet where even your own breathing feels too loud. As I reached the kitchen, I heard Maya's voice. Soft, urgent, coming from the back balcony. She was on the phone. I didn't intend to eavesdrop. God knows I've spent my life trying not to hear things. But her words froze me in place. I told her she has to come, Maya whispered. She's the only one they'll trust with the baby. My heart beat slow, heavy. Each word landed like a stone on my chest. Then a man's voice replied, not my son. I knew my son's voice like I knew my own heartbeat. This one was deeper, rougher, restless. Maya, you handle this alone. You know that. She exhaled shakily. I don't have a choice. He left again. I can't handle this alone anymore. You know that. Left again. My own son, leaving his wife, leaving his child, leaving his responsibilities, while I was out there rebuilding my life, believing I had raised him better than this. I stood there in the shadow of the hallway, my hand still on the kitchen doorway, feeling like the floor shifted under me. The man's voice returned. Maya, listen to me. If anyone finds out we're talking again, especially her, you'll lose everything. Everything. What secret had rooted itself so deeply that even speaking about it sounded dangerous? Maya's voice broke. Just stay on the call, okay? Just for a minute. Please. I can't do this alone anymore. I closed my eyes. Not out of anger, but out of grief. Because the loneliness in her voice was the same loneliness I had carried for most of my life. The same ache, the same desperation, the same exhaustion of being strong for too long. For a moment, I imagined stepping onto the balcony, demanding the truth, confronting the lies, but something held me still. She wasn't using me. She wasn't plotting against me. She wasn't manipulating me. She was drowning. And she was calling out to the only hand she thought could pull her up, even if that hand was the wrong one. I stepped back quietly, letting her finish her call. I warmed my milk, sat at the table, listened to the ticking clock. Steady, relentless. My own son's failures were no longer whispers. They had taken shape, and the truth was going to unravel whether I wanted it to or not. But I didn't feel anger towards Maya. No. I felt something I never expected to feel again for someone in this house. Protection. Because if my son had abandoned her, if he had left her carrying all the weight, if he had pushed her into secrecy and desperation, then it wasn't Maya who was the problem. It was my own blood. And I was going to find out exactly what he had done and why. But I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of the story. This was the door to the room where all the hidden truths were waiting. And I had just stepped inside. That night, after Maya hung up the phone, I pretended not to notice the quiet tremble in her hands as she walked back inside. She avoided my eyes, the way people do when they're carrying more truth than they can hold. I didn't push, not yet, because sometimes if you push a fragile heart too hard, it shatters. And I needed Maya whole if I was going to understand what was really happening. The next morning, I woke early, made tea, fed little Ishan while his mother showered. Routine things, soft tasks that make a home feel alive. But in the middle of stirring oatmeal, my phone buzzed. A message. It was from my elder sister. A single line. "Is everything all right with your son?" My stomach tightened. I hadn't told anyone I was back home. I hadn't mentioned anything about my son. So how? I called her immediately. Her voice was low, cautious. "I didn't want to worry you," she began. "But there are rumors." Rumors. That word carries a special weight in families like ours. Rumors don't form from air. They grow from something with roots. "What kind of rumors?" I asked. She sighed. "A friend told me your son has been seen with someone else. More than once." My hand froze on the kitchen counter. Not anger. Not yet. Just disbelief. A slow, cold disbelief that spread through my chest like winter. "He's married," I said quietly. "I know. Which is why I'm telling you." She didn't stay on the phone long, and she didn't need to. Because the memory of Maya's broken voice from the night before, her saying he left again, suddenly made a painful, awful kind of sense. My son. My boy. The child I raised with every scrap of love I had was walking down a path I never thought he'd choose. Ishan tugged on my sleeve, pulling me back to the present. "Daddy, more cereal." I forced a smile, kissed his forehead, and continued feeding him. But inside, my heart was sinking into a depth I wasn't sure I could climb out of. Later that afternoon, Maya finally sat with me. She looked tired, drained, eyes swollen in a way she tried to hide with makeup, but couldn't. "Auntie," she said softly, "I'm sorry if this weekend is an inconvenience for you." I shook my head. "It isn't. I'm here because you asked." She swallowed. Her hands fidgeted in her lap. "I know, but I still feel guilty." Guilty? A woman only feels guilty when she believes she's asking for more than she deserves, and that told me everything. So I put my hand on hers. "Tell me the truth, Maya." She froze. Completely. Like someone had pulled the air out of the room. "Auntie," her voice cracked. "I don't want to trouble you with my problems." "They're not just your problems," I said gently. "They involve my son. And I deserve to know." For a moment, she hesitated, as if confessing would break something sacred. Then her shoulders slumped. Her breath shook. And the truth began to spill. "Auntie, he's been staying out. For days. Sometimes weeks." My heart squeezed. He leaves you alone with the baby? She nodded. He says it's work, but a tear slid down her cheek. I saw messages from another woman. The words landed like stones, heavy, sharp, unavoidable. How long? I asked quietly. Since I was pregnant, she whispered. He promised he'd change after the baby. He didn't. He wiped her tears quickly, embarrassed by her own pain. And the man you spoke to last night? I asked. Her eyes widened, fear flashing across her face. You heard that? I did. She looked down, twisting her fingers. He's just a friend. Someone I used to know. Nothing more. I just needed someone to talk to. Someone who listens. Her voice broke, raw, exhausted. I'm not doing anything wrong, Auntie. I swear. I'm just lonely. I'm drowning, and I don't know who to turn to anymore. I believed her. Not because she said it, but because the pain in her voice had no lies in it. I reached out, held her hand tighter. Maya, listen to me, I said firmly. You are not the one who should be ashamed. My son's choices are his own, and you are not responsible for fixing his failures. She cried then, quiet, shaking sobs that she tried to muffle, out of habit, out of fear, out of being ignored too many times. I held her, gently, the way I once held my own daughter on the nights she felt like the world was too heavy. When her tears softened, she whispered, I didn't want you to think badly of him. I closed my eyes, because the truth was, I already did. Not forever, not beyond forgiveness, but enough to know that he had broken something that might never fully heal. Maya, I said softly, have you told him how you feel? She shook her head. Whenever I try, he shuts me down, says I'm overreacting, says he's providing for us, says I should trust him. I felt a heat rise in my chest, not anger at her, but at him, at the boy I raised, at the man he had become without me noticing. I took a slow, steady breath. Then we'll talk to him together, and he will answer for this. Her eyes widened. Auntie, no, I said firmly. You've been carrying this burden alone long enough. It's time he carried his share. She stared at me, like she had been waiting months to hear those words. Auntie, thank you. I shook my head. You don't need to thank me. You are family, and I won't let you drown. That night, I stayed awake long after everyone slept, thinking, remembering, hurting. I raised my son with the best I had. I taught him love, honesty, responsibility. But somewhere along the way, he lost his reflection, and now the consequences of his choices had fallen on a woman who deserved better. By morning, my decision was made. My son was coming home, and when he arrived, he would find a mother who was no longer willing to close her eyes to his sins. I had protected him his whole life, but now I was going to protect the woman he had left behind, because this wasn't just Maya's fight anymore. It was mine. And I was done being silent. My son walked into the house the next afternoon, And the moment I saw his face, I felt something inside me twist. He looked tired, but not the tired that comes from work. No, this was the tired that comes from guilt, from secrets, from living two lives and failing at both. He didn't expect to see me. That was obvious. The shock in his eyes said everything. "Ma," he said, stopping in the doorway, what are you doing here?" I didn't greet him. Not with warmth, not with anger, just with silence. A silence heavy enough to demand honesty. "I'm here because your wife needed me," I said calmly. His jaw tightened slightly. "That's not necessary. Maya's fine." "No, she isn't." He blinked, taken aback by my tone, maybe for the first time in his life. I stepped aside, let him enter, let him feel the weight of the home he had abandoned one late night at a time. Maya came out of the kitchen holding Ishan. She tried to smile, tried to pretend, but her eyes, they gave her away instantly. My son looked at her with that guilty half smile men use when they think affection can wash away their sins. "Hey," he said softly, "I was going to call." "No, you weren't," Maya said quietly. And for the first time, her voice didn't shake. Good, I thought. She was finally finding her backbone again. We all sat down in the living room, the kind of sitting where no one relaxes, where every heartbeat is loud, where every second is waiting for the truth to explode. My son leaned back, pretending to be calm. "Well, why does this feel like an intervention?" I folded my hands. "Because it is." He let out a short laugh, a nervous one. "Ma, please, you're making it sound like I've done something." "You have," I said firmly. His eyes flicked toward Maya. She looked down, guilt in her silence, shame that wasn't hers to carry. I took a deep breath, steady and clear. "I know about the other woman." His entire body stilled. Not a blink, not a breath, just stillness. The kind that only appears when someone is caught so deeply that lies become useless. "Ma, who told you that?" he whispered. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that it is the truth." He rubbed his forehead. "Maya, you told me not to involve anyone." "She didn't," I said. "I overheard her crying, and I heard her say that you'd left again." Maya closed her eyes, ashamed. He turned to her sharply. "Why would you stop?" I said, my voice firm, final, like a door slamming shut. "You will not talk to her that way, not in my presence, not after what you've done." His shoulders dropped, just slightly, not in surrender, but in the realization that he could no longer escape. "I'm trying," he muttered. "You don't understand." "Then make me understand," I said calmly. "Because right now, all I see is a man who abandoned his wife and his son for a woman who doesn't even stand by you." He looked up sharply. "How do you know she doesn't?" "Because if she did, she wouldn't be walking in here alone." Silence. Sharp. Cutting. Maya held Ishan tighter. The baby rested his head on her shoulder. Peaceful. Unaware of the storm around him. I softened my tone slightly, not for him, but for the mother in me, who still remembered the little boy he used to be. "When did this start?" I asked gently. He stared at the floor. His voice came out low, ashamed. "Before the baby was born." I swallowed the pain that rose in my throat, not for me, but for Maya. for the nights she must have cried alone, pregnant, vulnerable, waiting for her husband to choose her. Why? I asked softly. He shook his head. I don't know. I wasn't ready to be a father, and she made me feel alive. Maya's lips trembled, but she didn't cry. Not this time. And what does Maya make you feel? I asked. He glanced at her. His voice dropped to a whisper. Responsible. There it was. The truth. Ugly. Bare. Real. Not love. Not partnership. Not fear of loss. Just responsibility. I leaned back, letting the truth sit between us. Son, I said quietly, you don't marry someone to escape responsibility. You marry someone because you are ready to share the weight of life together. He looked at me, eyes full of regret he didn't yet know how to carry. I messed up, he whispered. Yes, I said. You did. He swallowed hard. I'll stop. I'll fix things. I'll do better. I shook my head slowly. You won't fix anything. Not with promises. Not with temporary guilt. Not with a few sweet words. He stared at me, confused. So I leaned forward, my voice steady, calm, undeniable. If you want this marriage to survive, you must rebuild it. Brick by brick. Truth by truth. Apology by apology. He nodded. Slowly. Unsure. Uneasy. I continued. And if you don't, if you choose this other woman, then at least be man enough to say it out loud. To her and to your son. Maya's breath caught. His eyes widened. Because, I said softly, what you will not do is drag Maya through more lies, more waiting, more silent suffering. He blinked rapidly, shock hitting him in slow waves. Ma, I don't want to lose my family. I sighed, a long, heavy exhale that carried months of Maya's pain. You already started losing them, I said, when you chose someone else's attention over your wife's devotion. Silence filled the room, thick, unforgiving, necessary. He finally looked at Maya, really looked at her. Maya, he whispered, I'm sorry. She didn't answer. Not with words. Her silence spoke louder, a silence full of hurt, doubt, and exhaustion. He reached for her hand. She gently pulled away, not angrily, just tiredly. And that tiny gesture shook him more than any confrontation could, because in that moment, he realized something. He wasn't the only one who could walk away. Later that evening, I found him alone on the balcony, head in his hands, guilt rising around him like smoke. Ma, he whispered as I approached, did I destroy my own home? I placed a hand on his shoulder. I destroyed the trust in it, I said. But a home can be rebuilt if both hearts are willing. He nodded slowly. Tears he tried to hide gathered in his eyes. I didn't comfort him with lies, didn't say everything would be fine, didn't make promises on Maya's behalf. Instead, I gave him the truth he needed, not the one he wanted. Son, I said gently, now it is not about what you want. It's about what you're willing to do. Because love is a choice, loyalty is a choice, repair is a choice. And tonight, My son was standing at the edge of the biggest choice of his life. You know, when life finally comes full circle, it doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly, soft, certain, like a truth you always knew, but finally get to witness. Years passed, not quickly, not easily, but with purpose. Every new achievement, every risk I took, every late night spent building the life I wanted led me here, to this point, this version of me, the one they never believed I could become. And then, one winter morning, my phone rang. A number I hadn't seen in years. A number that once controlled my entire world, my family. I let it ring twice, 3 times, and then I picked up. My mother's voice was smaller than I remembered, polite, almost fragile. She asked how I was, what I was doing, if I was eating well. Questions she never asked when I lived under her roof. Then she said the words I never expected to hear. "We're proud of you." For a moment, I didn't speak. Not because I was emotional, but because I finally understood something. Their approval was no longer my oxygen. Their validation was no longer my fuel. Their opinions were just opinions. Nothing more. But I said thank you. Not for them, but for me. Because forgiveness isn't something you give to others. It's something you give to yourself, so you can walk forward without carrying their weight. A few months later, they invited me home. Not as the daughter they once underestimated, but as the woman they now needed guidance from. I walked into the house I once left with a suitcase full of fear and returned with a heart full of strength. My brother greeted me first, the golden child. Except now, his shine had faded. Life had humbled him in ways he never expected. He said softly, "Congratulations, you did really well." And I smiled, not with arrogance, not with revenge, but with peace. Because the greatest revenge isn't anger. It isn't proving them wrong. It's becoming someone who doesn't need their approval at all. We sat together, the whole family, talking, laughing, understanding each other in a way we never did before. They asked how I achieved everything, how I built my career, how I stayed consistent even when no one supported me. And I answered honestly. When no one believes in you, you either break or you rise. I chose to rise. My father nodded slowly like he finally understood. My mother looked at me with soft eyes, a kind of love she didn't know how to show when I was young. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the invisible daughter. Before I left that evening, my aunt, the same one who once mocked me, stood up and held my hands. "Beta, forgive us. We didn't know your strength." And I said, "You weren't supposed to know. I had to discover it myself." That's the truth. Strength isn't something people give you. It's something you build in silence, when no one is watching, when no one believes. As I walked out of that house, I felt something powerful settle in my heart. A calm victory, the kind that doesn't need noise, the kind that speaks for itself. I realized something important that day. Sometimes the people who break you are the same people who end up respecting the version of you that rises from the pieces. And sometimes the story you write for yourself is far bigger than the story they imagined for you. This, my journey, my struggle, my silence, my strength, This was the victory they never saw coming. And trust me, your victory, it's coming too. Keep going. Keep rising. Keep fighting quietly. Because one day, you'll return to the same place they doubted you, and you'll walk out with your head high, knowing the world finally sees what you always knew. You were never the underestimated one. You were the unstoppable one.